A wedding is meant to be the happiest day of a couple's life. But for one bride, it turned into a nightmare she never woke up from. This is the shocking true story of a bride who was murdered on her wedding day. And the person responsible, her own mother-in-law. What could drive a mother to commit such a horrifying act on the most sacred day of her son's life? Was it jealousy, family honor, or something much darker? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling details behind this tragic case, reveal what led to this deadly confrontation, and expose the shocking truth that many people don't know. You won't believe what really happened that day. Before we delve into the tragic events of the wedding day, it's essential to understand the individuals involved and their relationships. The bride, Samantha Miller. Samantha Miller, affectionately known as Sam to her friends and family, was a 34-year-old woman from Charlotte, North Carolina. Described as vibrant and full of life, Sam had a passion for helping others and was deeply involved in her community. Her radiant smile and compassionate nature left a lasting impression on everyone she met. She had a successful career and was known for her dedication and hard work. Friends and colleagues often spoke of her as someone who could light up a room and was always willing to lend a helping hand. The groom, Eric Hutchinson. Eric Hutchinson, also 34, hailed from Utah but had made a life for himself in the Carolinas. An avid sports enthusiast, Eric enjoyed outdoor activities and had a particular love for golf. He was known for his easygoing demeanor and was well-liked by those who knew him. Professionally, Eric was successful in his field and was admired for his work ethic and integrity. His friends described him as dependable, loyal, and someone who cherished his relationships deeply. Their relationship. Sam and Eric's love story began several years before their wedding day. They met through mutual friends and quickly formed a deep connection. Their shared interests and values laid the foundation for a strong and loving relationship. Over time, their bond grew, and they decided to spend their lives together. They were known as a loving and supportive couple, often seen attending community events and spending time with family and friends. Their relationship was admired by many, and they were considered a perfect match by those who knew them. The groom's mother, Annette Hutchinson. Annette Hutchinson, Eric's mother, was a resident of South Carolina. She had a close relationship with her son and was supportive of his relationship with Sam. Annette was known for her warmth and hospitality, often hosting family gatherings and being actively involved in her community. She had a nurturing nature and was considered the glue that held the family together. Her relationship with Sam was cordial, and they shared mutual respect and affection. Family dynamics. The Hutchinson family valued close-knit relationships and often spent time together during holidays and special occasions. Annette had welcomed Sam into the family, and they had built a bond over shared family events and gatherings. There was a sense of unity and mutual respect among them. Annette's support for her son's relationship was evident, and she played an active role in the couple's lives, offering guidance and wisdom when needed. Understanding the backgrounds and relationships of these individuals provides insight into the depth of the tragedy that unfolded. The events of that fateful day not only shattered a couple's dreams, but also left a lasting impact on their families and community. Before we get into the tragic events of the wedding day, it's important to understand what was supposed to be a joyful occasion. The wedding had been planned for months, and every detail was carefully arranged to make it the perfect day for the bride and groom. Family and friends had traveled from near and far to witness the union of two people deeply in love. The venue was decorated beautifully, with flowers, elegant lighting, and a sense of anticipation in the air. Guests were dressed in their finest, ready to celebrate a love story that had been years in the making. The ceremony was set to take place in the late afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the event. The bride, radiant in her white gown, was surrounded by her bridesmaids, who were helping her with final touches before she walked down the aisle. She was nervous but excited, her heart pounding with the thrill of what was to come. Meanwhile, the groom was with his groomsmen, adjusting his tie and exchanging jokes to ease the nervous energy. He was ready to start this new chapter of his life, standing beside the woman he loved. Among the guests was the groom's mother, a woman who had always been protective of her son. She had watched him grow, guided him through life, and had her own dreams of what his future would look like. To outsiders, she appeared to be a proud mother, smiling at her son as he prepared to take this monumental step. But behind that smile, there were emotions stirring, feelings that no one fully understood at the time. As the ceremony began, the music played softly, signaling the bride's entrance. All eyes turned toward her as she walked down the aisle, her face glowing with happiness. The groom's expression was one of pure love and admiration. Everything was going as planned, and for a brief moment, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. The vows were exchanged, and the couple was pronounced husband and wife. Applause filled the air, and the newlyweds shared their first kiss as a married couple. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception area, where the atmosphere was lively and full of joy. Laughter and conversation filled the space as people enjoyed their meals and toasted to the couple's future. The bride and groom shared their first dance, a moment they would cherish forever. Friends and family took turns congratulating them, offering well wishes and reminiscing about old memories. It was everything they had hoped for, a night of love, celebration, and new beginnings. But beneath the surface, something was brewing. A tension that had gone unnoticed during the festivities was about to come to light in the most devastating way. The groom's mother, who had smiled through the ceremony, had been struggling with emotions she could no longer contain. Whether it was resentment, anger, or a sense of loss, no one could say for sure. But what happened next would turn a night of joy into one of unimaginable horror. As the evening continued, the bride stepped away for a moment, perhaps to take a breath, and soak in the reality of her new life. It was in this moment that the unexpected occurred. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. What had been a dream wedding became a nightmare, and the happiness that filled the air was replaced with shock, screams, and chaos. The celebrations came to an abrupt halt as guests tried to process what had just happened. No one could believe it. No one saw it coming. And as the truth unfolded, it became clear that this wedding would be remembered not for love and joy, but for an unimaginable tragedy. The joyful atmosphere of the wedding reception was suddenly shattered by an event no one could have predicted. The sound of music and laughter was drowned out by a single, chilling scream. Guests turned in confusion, their smiles fading as they tried to understand what had just happened. In the center of it all stood the groom's mother, her face twisted with rage and something even darker, something no one had ever seen in her before. And there, on the floor, lay the bride, motionless. A moment of silence passed, a stunned disbelief settling over the crowd before chaos erupted. People rushed toward the scene, their voices rising in panic. Some screamed for help, others froze in horror, unable to process what their eyes were seeing. The groom, who had just been holding his wife's hand minutes before, now stood paralyzed, his face drained of color. His mother, the woman who had raised him, the woman he trusted, had done the unthinkable. The bride's white dress, once a symbol of purity and love, was now stained with red. Someone shouted for a doctor, but deep down, everyone knew it was too late. The events leading up to this horrifying moment had been brewing beneath the surface, unnoticed by most. There had been subtle tensions throughout the day, small glances exchanged, a certain stiffness in the groom's mother's demeanor. She had been holding something inside, a storm of emotions she had managed to conceal, until she couldn't anymore. Whether it was resentment, jealousy, or a sense of betrayal, no one could say for sure. But in that moment, everything she had been feeling came out in the most violent way possible. The groom dropped to his knees beside his bride, his hands shaking as he touched her face, hoping for any sign of life. But there was none. Guests wept openly, some turning away, unable to bear the sight. Security rushed in, trying to make sense of what had happened. And there, standing among them all, was the woman responsible, the mother who had just destroyed her own son's future. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She simply stood there, her breathing heavy, as if she, too, couldn't believe what she had just done. As the authorities arrived, the reality of the situation began to sink in. The wedding had turned into a crime scene. The flowers, the decorations, the carefully arranged tables, all of it was now nothing more than a backdrop to an unspeakable tragedy. The night that was supposed to mark the beginning of a new life for the couple had instead ended in a way no one could have ever imagined. And as the bride was carried away, never to return, one question remained unanswered: why? What could have driven a mother to commit such a monstrous act on the most sacred day of her son's life? The answers, if they existed, would come later. But for now, there was only grief, shock, and the haunting realization that nothing would ever be the same again. The aftermath of the tragedy was a scene of complete devastation. The wedding guests, once filled with joy and celebration, now stood frozen in shock. Some wept openly, unable to comprehend what had just occurred. Others whispered in hushed tones, their faces pale with disbelief. How had a day of love turned into something so horrific? How could a mother do this on her own son's wedding day? The groom sat motionless beside his bride, his hands still gripping hers, as if refusing to let go. His world had just shattered before his eyes. The woman he had vowed to spend the rest of his life with was gone, taken from him in an instant. His mind replayed the events over and over, searching for a moment when he could have stopped this, a sign he had missed, anything that would have warned him of the storm that had been brewing. But there was nothing, no warning, no indication that his mother had been capable of something so monstrous. Police officers moved quickly, securing the scene and taking statements from those who had witnessed the horror. The groom's mother, still standing where she had committed the crime, showed no sign of remorse. Her face was unreadable, her eyes distant, as if she, too, was processing what she had done. Some guests looked at her with disgust, others with pity, but no one could understand what had driven her to such an act. As she was taken into custody, whispers spread among the crowd. Speculations grew. Was it jealousy? Had there been past conflicts between her and the bride that no one knew about? Or was it something deeper, something rooted in a past grudge or unspoken resentment? People began recalling small moments from earlier in the evening, searching for clues in her behavior, in her interactions. Some remembered her stiffness during the ceremony, the way she had barely smiled when the couple exchanged vows. Others noted how she had seemed distant, lost in thought, even as people around her celebrated. But no one had imagined this. No one had thought it would end like this. News of the tragedy spread quickly, reaching beyond the wedding guests to the wider community. Friends, relatives, and even strangers who had never met the couple were shaken by the story. Social media exploded with messages of shock, sorrow, and outrage. People demanded answers, justice for the bride whose life had been stolen so cruelly. The police began their investigation, piecing together the events that had led to this moment. They interviewed family members, searched for past tensions, and tried to understand the motive behind the crime. For the groom, life would never be the same. Just hours earlier, he had been standing at the altar, looking into the eyes of the woman he loved, dreaming of their future together. Now, that future was gone. The honeymoon they had planned would never happen. The home they had dreamed of building together would never be filled with laughter and love. Instead, he was left with memories, with the haunting image of the moment everything had changed. As the night turned to dawn, the wedding venue, once filled with music and joy, was now eerily silent. The decorations remained, the tables still set, but the magic of the night had vanished. What was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives had become a nightmare that no one would ever forget. And as the world tried to make sense of it all, one thing was certain: this wedding, meant to be a celebration of love, would forever be remembered as a day of unimaginable loss. In the days following the tragedy, the world struggled to come to terms with what had happened. News outlets covered the story relentlessly, each detail more shocking than the last. People who had never met the couple were now invested in their story, searching for answers to the question that lingered in everyone's minds: why? What could have driven a mother to commit such an unforgivable act on her son's most important day? Investigators dug deep into the lives of those involved, searching for any clues that might explain the unthinkable. Friends and family were interviewed, and every interaction leading up to the wedding was scrutinized. It was soon revealed that tensions had been brewing long before the wedding day. The groom's mother had never fully approved of the bride, though she had kept her true feelings hidden from most people. Those close to the family started to recall small moments, offhand comments, subtle looks of disapproval, a coldness that had gone unnoticed in the excitement of wedding planning. Some reports suggested that the mother had always been overprotective of her son, feeling a sense of control over his life. When he chose to marry, she may have felt as though she was losing him, as if his love for his new wife somehow took away from his love for her. Others speculated that there were deeper issues at play, long-standing resentment, personal struggles, or even mental health problems that had gone undiagnosed. Whatever the cause, one thing was clear: this was not a random act of violence. It was something that had been festering beneath the surface, waiting for the moment to explode. Psychologists and crime experts weighed in on the case, offering theories on why a mother would turn against her own family in such a brutal way. Some pointed to cases of extreme possessiveness, where parents struggle to let go of their children as they build lives of their own. Others suggested the possibility of an underlying psychological disorder, something that had gone unnoticed until it was too late. But no matter how many explanations were given, none of them could justify the horror of what had happened. As the trial approached, the public's reaction grew more intense. Some people felt sympathy for the groom's mother, believing that she must have been battling her own demons. Others were filled with rage, demanding the harshest punishment possible. The groom himself remained largely silent, retreating from the public eye as he tried to process his grief. He had lost the woman he loved, but he had also lost his mother in a different way. She was no longer the person he had known all his life. She had become a stranger, someone capable of an unthinkable act. The wedding venue, once a place of celebration, now carried the weight of tragedy. The staff who had worked that night struggled to move past what they had witnessed. The guests, forever haunted by that fateful evening, found themselves replaying the moments leading up to the attack, wondering if there had been any signs they had missed. The groom's family was torn apart, divided between mourning the bride and coming to terms with the actions of their own blood. But perhaps the greatest tragedy was that the bride's life had been stolen before she even had the chance to live the future she had dreamed of. She had walked down the aisle with hope in her heart, believing she was about to start the happiest chapter of her life. Instead, she had been betrayed in the worst way possible, taken from the world in a moment of senseless violence. As the case unfolded, people across the world followed every update, desperate for justice, for answers, for some kind of closure. But could there ever truly be closure for something so devastating? The memory of that night would never fade. It would linger in the minds of those who had been there, in the whispers of those who heard the story, in the heart of a groom who had lost everything. And so the question remained: was this a crime fueled by hatred, jealousy, or something even more sinister? Could anything have been done to stop it? Or was this always destined to happen, a tragedy waiting in the shadows, ready to strike when no one expected it? This tragic incident serves as a heartbreaking reminder of how deep-seated emotions, unresolved conflicts, and unchecked resentment can lead to unthinkable consequences. A wedding, meant to symbolize love, unity, and new beginnings, instead became a scene of unimaginable loss. One moment of rage destroyed not just one life, but shattered an entire family, leaving behind wounds that may never heal. It's crucial to recognize the warning signs of emotional distress and unresolved family tensions. Open communication, counseling, and conflict resolution can prevent situations from escalating to such devastating levels. No celebration should ever turn into a tragedy. No life should ever be lost to anger or jealousy. As a society, we must work toward creating environments where issues can be addressed before they reach a breaking point. If this story moved you, help spread awareness by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We bring you real stories that shock, inform, and make you think. Stay with us for more compelling content, and remember, sometimes The most important stories are the ones that teach us the hardest lessons.